A woman carrying what she claimed was a gift box approached a restaurant in central Moscow. Seconds later, a powerful explosion tore through the entrance, leaving at least 5 people dead and more than 20 others injured, according to the latest reports. Russian authorities have now officially labeled the incident a terrorist attack, while investigators are examining whether it connects to a growing series of mysterious assassinations targeting senior Russian military figures since the war in Ukraine began. If that connection proves real, this would represent another dramatic expansion of a shadow war already reaching deep inside Russia's capital. But even if investigators reach a different conclusion, one reality has become impossible to ignore. Moscow, once considered one of Russia's most secure cities, is increasingly becoming a battlefield far from the front lines. The biggest question now isn't simply who carried out the attack. It's why high-profile explosions inside Russia are becoming more frequent and what that says about the direction of this conflict. According to Russia's National Anti-Terrorism Committee, the explosion occurred outside a restaurant in central Moscow when a woman attempted to enter carrying an explosive device concealed inside what she described as a gift box. Russian newspaper Kommersant reported that a security guard stopped her at the entrance moments before the explosion. Both the woman and the guard were among those killed. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin later described the incident as a brutal terrorist attack and pledged that those responsible would be identified and prosecuted. Several Russian media outlets reported that a birthday celebration for a military general was taking place inside the restaurant, although authorities have not officially confirmed that detail. Investigators are also examining whether the attack connects to previous explosions that have killed senior Russian military officers since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. At this stage, officials have not publicly identified those responsible, and investigators continue examining multiple possibilities. But regardless of who ultimately carried out the bombing, the incident fits into a broader pattern that deserves closer examination. For decades, Moscow projected an image of tight internal security. Russia invested heavily in surveillance systems, intelligence networks, and domestic security services designed to prevent major attacks inside the capital. Public spaces, transportation hubs, and government districts remain among the most monitored urban environments in Europe. Yet since the war in Ukraine began, that sense of security has steadily weakened. Russia has experienced drone attacks, sabotage operations, railway disruptions, fires at strategic facilities, and multiple targeted explosions involving military figures. Some incidents have occurred hundreds of kilometers from the battlefield, demonstrating that geography no longer guarantees safety. Whether each individual incident shares the same perpetrators remains unclear. Different attacks may involve different actors with different motivations. However, together they create the perception that Russia's internal security apparatus faces growing pressure. The psychological impact matters almost as much as the physical damage. Even relatively limited attacks force authorities to expand security measures, divert intelligence resources, and reassure the public that critical infrastructure and senior officials remain protected. That brings us to the second and more politically sensitive question. Was this simply terrorism, or was someone being specifically targeted? One reported detail immediately attracted attention. Several independent Russian media outlets cited eyewitness accounts claiming a military general's birthday celebration was taking place inside the restaurant when the explosion occurred. Authorities have not confirmed that information publicly. If investigators eventually determine that senior military personnel were the intended targets, the attack would fit a pattern that has emerged since 2022. Russia has witnessed several high-profile explosions and assassinations involving military officers, defense officials, pro-war commentators, and individuals connected to Russia's military establishment. Responsibility has varied, investigations remain disputed in some cases, and public evidence has not always been comprehensive. That uncertainty makes responsible analysis essential. At present, there is no official confirmation that Saturday's bombing targeted any specific general or that it directly links to previous attacks. Russian investigators themselves have stated they are examining possible connections rather than announcing conclusions. Nevertheless, the possibility alone carries strategic significance. If senior military personnel increasingly require heightened security, even while attending private events inside Moscow, it demonstrates how modern conflict increasingly blurs the distinction between front lines and rear areas. And that shift extends beyond Russia itself. The Ukraine war has transformed how many governments think about security. Traditional warfare focused primarily on armies confronting one another across defined front lines. Today's conflicts increasingly involve cyber operations, intelligence activities, drones, sabotage, targeted assassinations, and attacks on symbolic, political, or military figures. These operations pursue more than physical destruction, they seek psychological effects. Every successful attack forces governments to allocate additional security resources, review protection procedures, investigate intelligence failures, and reassure domestic audiences. Even unsuccessful attacks can produce strategic consequences by creating uncertainty and forcing defensive responses. Urban centers have become particularly important in this environment because attacks inside capital cities generate enormous political attention regardless of their military significance. That explains why investigators are carefully examining every detail surrounding this incident. Determining whether the bombing represents organized terrorism, targeted political violence, criminal activity, or another form of attack will influence Russia's future security posture far beyond the immediate investigation. For Russia, this incident reinforces growing concerns about internal security during a prolonged conflict. Authorities will likely strengthen protection around military personnel, public gatherings, and government facilities while expanding counterterrorism operations. For Ukraine and the wider region, any confirmed link between this explosion and the broader conflict could further intensify already strained relations and increase security measures across neighboring countries. At this stage, however, investigators have not publicly established such a connection. For intelligence services worldwide, the attack highlights how modern conflicts increasingly combine conventional warfare with covert operations, information campaigns, and attacks far from active battlefields. For ordinary citizens, the incident illustrates a broader global trend. Modern wars increasingly reach beyond traditional combat zones, affecting civilian spaces, public events, and major cities that once appeared insulated from military conflict. Ultimately, the strategic importance of this bombing will depend less on the explosion itself than on what investigators ultimately discover about who planned it, how it was executed, and why this particular location was chosen. Whether this was an act of terrorism, a targeted assassination, or something else entirely, one fact is already clear. In today's conflicts, the front line is no longer defined by geography, it is defined by where violence suddenly appears next.